I'll tell you what's a high tariff nation is Canada. Canada charges us 250% for our milk product and other product, and a tremendous tariff on lumber and things as such. And yet we don't need their lumber. We have more lumber than they do. We don't need Canada's lumber.
Major construction firms across the United States just issued a rare, coordinated warning. The housing market is entering unprecedented instability, driven by tightening Canadian softwood lumber supply with no relief in sight. And here's the shocking part. Canada never announced a ban. There was no dramatic shutdown, no export embargo, no political theatrics. Yet builders, developers, and contractors across America are scrambling because the damage is already devastating and it's about to get exponentially worse. Here's the part Washington does not want to admit. Roughly 30 to 35% of all softwood lumber used in American home building comes from Canada. And Canada has fundamentally restructured how it prices, processes, and distributes that lumber in ways that sidestep tariffs entirely while inflicting maximum economic pressure on the United States. This is not a headline-grabbing move. It is a structural transformation, and it sits at the absolute center of the modern trade conflict, exposing vulnerabilities inside the United States that decades of policy mistakes created, but nobody wanted to acknowledge. The math is brutal. In a typical wood frame American house, lumber accounts for 20 to 25% of total material costs. Industry estimates are clear. A 10% increase in lumber prices adds between $8,000 and $15,000 to the price of a new home. For buyers already crushed by high interest rates and persistent inflation, that is not a minor inconvenience. It is a structural shock that pushes homeownership permanently out of reach for millions of families. So the central question is this. If Canada is not banning lumber exports, why is Washington increasingly panicked about the largest construction cost crisis in decades? The answer reveals a strategy so sophisticated that most American policymakers completely missed it until it was too late. Canada is not acting through dramatic announcements. Canada is acting through structure. And it is tightening lumber supply across 5 separate dimensions simultaneously, without ever once declaring a restriction. The first lever is production control. Canada has quietly reduced softwood lumber output by closing and consolidating older, less efficient sawmills across the country. Since the peak year of 2018, national softwood production has fallen by roughly 15 to 20%. In British Columbia alone, more than 10,000 forestry jobs disappeared between 2019 and 2025. This is not a temporary market cycle. It is a deliberate reset of capacity designed to permanently reduce the volume of cheap lumber flooding American markets. Fewer mills mean less output. Less output means tighter supply. Tighter supply means higher prices, and Canada captures that premium instead of American buyers. The second lever is domestic priority. Canadian provinces are increasingly directing available lumber toward their own housing projects, infrastructure, and public construction. Exporting to the United States is no longer treated as the default option. When supply gets constrained, American buyers move to the back of the line, not because of explicit tariffs, but because of a policy choice. Canadian governments decided their own citizens, their own builders, and their own economy deserve first access to Canadian resources. That single shift in priority changes everything about North American supply chains. The third lever is value-added processing. Canada is exporting dramatically less raw lumber and significantly more engineered wood products, cross-laminated timber, glued laminated beams, advanced structural panels. The result is higher export value but lower physical volume for American construction. That means fewer affordable boards available at any price. Canada captures more revenue per tree by processing domestically rather than shipping raw logs south, keeping jobs, wages, and economic value inside Canada while American builders scramble for basic materials. And if you want the real story behind how Canada is still holding its ground through tariffs, wars, and hard times, hit join below to join the membership for exclusive documentaries you won't see anywhere else about Canada's progress and rise through uncertainty. The fourth lever is environmental standards. New carbon tracking requirements and sustainability certifications raise compliance costs across the industry. American buyers can still technically purchase Canadian lumber, but it is more expensive and less abundant than before. This transforms environmental policy into an indirect trade lever, one that bypasses traditional tariff frameworks entirely while achieving the same economic outcome of reducing American access to cheap inputs. The fifth lever is logistics prioritization. Railways and ports now prioritize energy shipments, mineral exports, and critical materials over lumber. Lumber shipments face deliberate delays, heightened uncertainty, and rising transport costs another invisible squeeze that compounds every other pressure point. This is not a ban. It is a structural choke point carefully constructed across 5 dimensions at once, making it nearly impossible for the United States to counteract through traditional trade policy. The impact on American construction is catastrophic and accelerating. When lumber prices spike, builders don't simply absorb the cost. They add risk premiums on top of the material increases, pricing defensively to protect against future volatility. As lumber costs climb, new home prices rise faster than wages, deepening the affordability crisis and feeding inflation throughout the economy. But the damage extends far beyond material costs. Less predictable supply creates a construction timeline crisis, where projects face constant delays. A single month of delay can raise total construction costs by 5 to 7% through financing charges, labor retention, and equipment rental fees. Then comes the market expectations crisis, where fear itself drives destructive behavior. Developers, distributors, and wholesalers rush to secure supply early, creating hoarding, speculative buying, and artificial shortages. Prices rise not only because lumber is genuinely tighter, but because markets expect it to be tighter. That feedback loop destabilizes pricing across the entire economy. And finally, there is the political crisis Washington fears most. Housing is no longer just an economic issue in America, it is a voter issue that decides elections. Rising home prices push younger families permanently out of ownership, raise rents across cities, and increase housing's weight inside inflation calculations. As inflation stays elevated, interest rates stay higher for longer, creating another cost spiral traceable directly to trade policy failures. But here is what most analysis completely misses. Canada actually gains from this entire restructuring. By shifting away from raw lumber exports toward processed wood products, Canada captures more value per tree while creating higher skilled, better paid jobs. Instead of exporting low margin inputs to America, Canada sells finished and semi-finished products with far stronger pricing power. By embedding carbon tracking, sustainability certification, and traceability requirements, Canada positions itself as a rule setter rather than a price taker in global markets. In a trade war era where tariffs are blunt instruments, standards become the sharper, more effective tool. Canada is also protecting its long-term resources by treating forests as strategic assets rather than inventory to be cleared. Slower harvesting supports ecological stability and supply predictability over decades, strengthening Canada's credibility as a reliable long-term supplier. And by diversifying away from American dependence, Canada reduces political pressure from Washington while building relationships with European and Asian buyers willing to meet Canadian standards and pay Canadian prices. So what is Canada really proving? This moment is not just about lumber. It is about leverage and long-term positioning in a global economy reshaped by trade conflict. Canada is sending 3 unmistakable messages. To Canadians, natural resources will no longer be sold at discount prices just to satisfy American demand. The goal is fewer exports, but better jobs, and more value kept at home. To the United States, Canada is no longer an unconditional safety valve for American consumption. Proximity no longer equals dependency. And to the world, Canada wants recognition as a stable, rules-based supplier, but not an unlimited one. Washington's response follows 3 predictable but ineffective paths. Tariffs and legal action return to the familiar softwood lumber duties, but in practice, tariffs just raise prices inside America without creating new supply. Pushing domestic production sounds viable until environmental regulations, permitting timelines, and local opposition make meaningful expansion take years. Switching to steel or concrete sounds logical until builders realize those materials are more expensive, more energy intensive, and already shaped by volatile global pricing. Together, these responses expose an uncomfortable truth. Canada did not create America's construction cost crisis. It revealed a dependency that already existed and applied pressure to the exact point of maximum vulnerability, quietly, methodically, and devastatingly effectively.